Hi there folks, my name's Tony from Malley Industries, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the safety features that come on the Braun Century Series lifts that can be a little quirky sometimes and need a little bit of troubleshooting out in the field. One of the most common things that we hear from clients is a issue with the drift hooks. So one of the common misconceptions about the drift hooks is that a new operator getting one of these lifts for the first time might think that these hooks are supposed to be engaged all the time when the lift is stowed, which is not the case. These are a safety feature. They are supposed to be disengaged like this when the lift is stowed. What happens is with any hydraulic system, as it sits over time, even a short amount of time, you will get some hydraulic bleed, which will lead to drift in the lift. And drift is when the lift just slowly comes down a little bit. These hooks are here to stop the lift from, say, leaning against the door of your van. Now I'm going to demonstrate here a little bit. If you're imagining this little bit of movement being the hydraulic bleed, you can see how the drift hook then engages. So now this hook is engaged. This lift will not come down until we go through the step of disengaging the drift hook. So this can happen doing what I just did, where you are slowly putting the lift down instead of committing and pressing the button all at once. Or it could happen if your van has been sitting for 3, 4, 5, 6 days without being used. So it's a common troubleshooting in the field thing that you go to put the lift down and you're pressing the button and nothing's happening, because look what happens right now when I go to do unfold. It won't move because the drift hook is holding it. So the remedy for this situation is we go with the fold button and we re-stow the lift all the way to being fully stowed. Like that. Sometimes you might even need to give it if you look and you see that the drift hook is, this one is disengaged, sometimes it might be still engaged. You need to give it a little push while you're doing the complete fold. Once you've got it up into the completely stowed position, you can see that both the drift hooks on either side are disengaged, and then you know you're free to unfold and it's going to come right down. So that right there is a very common in the field troubleshooting situation that we get calls about. The second one has to do with this right here. This is one of the key Braun safety features, which is this barrier, which is locked in place until the lift gets all the way down to the ground. Stops any unintentional rolling off the end of the platform. We're going to go all the way down to the ground, and you'll see the other barrier comes up at the back. So you've got barriers on either side now, creating that safety feature. When you touch down, it will deploy automatically. But it deploys automatically as long as the ground is nice and even, and the sensors that are here and here on the underside of the platform both come into contact with the ground. If you're on an uneven parking lot or just a piece of road where something is getting in the way of both of those sensors making contact with the ground, this flapper will stay up in the locked position. So you've got the lift all the way down on the ground and this flapper is locked up in your way. And when this is another thing that we get calls about, and there is a almost surefire troubleshooting that you can do for that. The first thing you want to try is you take your foot and you put it in this position along this plate. The sensors are on either end of the plate, and you stomp on it. Just one hard stomp, maybe two. Usually that's all it takes to make the sensors on either side contact with the ground, and as soon as you do that, that flapper will just pop right down onto the ground. There are occasional cases where the ground is so uneven, even stomping on there will not get the sensors to contact with the ground, and you need to put the lift back up in the van and move the van forward 10 feet to another piece of ground that looks a little better. That sometimes is necessary, but 9 times out of 10, a good hard step right there will deploy this flapper and make it so you can disembark your passenger no problem. So So another problem that can sometimes happen in the field, a little bit of troubleshooting that also has to do with the lifts in these full-size paratransit vans, is that by law you've got to have an interlock system. So you've got your interlock plate up here showing the lights, giving you the status of the interlock. Always want to make sure that you've got your 3 reds with your green status across this board. If you are noticing that your lift doesn't have any power, the first thing you want to do is come up and look at this. And it could be something as simple as your parking brake right here. See, I turn that on, I've got my PV for parking brake, and now I've got the green light for the power to the lift. You've also got to make sure to have your ignition turned on. So if you have your ignition off, then you'll lose the power. So ignition on, parking brake on, power on the lift on the back, have that switch turned on, and then you get your 3 reds with your green. Always check those out and make sure that they're all lit up. If they're not, that's the reason you're not getting the power to your lift at the back, is the interlock.